Clara had seen coyotes circle the gulch before, but that morning they moved differently, ears pinned, tails low, like something had already bled. She gripped her rifle tighter, stepping carefully down the slope, boots crunching on frost-bitten stone. The winter air was quiet, too quiet, and that's when she saw him. A boy, no more than 10, curled beneath a ledge, half covered in sand and dried blood, his dark hair stuck to his cheeks, and one leg bent wrong, like it had been caught and twisted. His eyes opened just as she approached, startled, wild, but he didn't scream. He couldn't. His lips were cracked, throat too dry for sound. Clara dropped beside him, instinct overriding fear. "Don't move," she whispered. "You're safe now." He blinked once, then passed out. She wrapped him in her coat, heart thudding with questions. Was he from a raided wagon? A runaway? But the feathers braided into his hair answered that before reason could catch up. Apache. And not just Apache. Judging by the beadwork and leather cords, someone's son. Someone important. She hesitated, pulse racing. Helping him might mean trouble. Serious trouble. But leaving him would make her no better than the men who'd chased his people from these hills. She didn't ride into town. She didn't ask for help. She took him to her cabin on the ridge, where no rancher rode and no marshal bothered to follow. The boy burned with fever that night, muttering in a language she couldn't understand, clutching at air. She cooled his head with damp cloth, fed him broth drop by drop, and whispered stories to keep the silence from crushing them both. He didn't wake. Not fully. But when the fire burned low and Clara finally drifted into sleep beside him, his small hand reached for hers in the dark. She held it without hesitation. Somewhere deep in the canyon, an owl cried once, and was answered. She didn't know that sound. Didn't know it meant she was no longer alone. That by touching this child, she'd lit a signal fire the earth could feel, and that 2 days was all it would take for the mountain to answer. By morning, the boy's fever had broken, but the snow outside had deepened. Clara stepped out with a bucket for water, and paused. Tracks, not hers, not the boy's. Hoofprints, fresh and wide, pressed into the snow like warnings. They circled her cabin, once, twice, then vanished back into the trees. No knock, no voice, just silent riders watching from the dark. Her breath caught. Someone knew. She rushed inside, bolting the door, eyes darting to the cot where the boy now stirred. His eyes blinked open slowly, dark and wary. He flinched when he saw her, but didn't pull away. "It's all right," Clara whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're safe." He tried to sit, but winced, clutching his side. She steadied him gently. "You've got a cracked rib, maybe worse." He watched her hands, his fingers twitching toward the leather pouch tied to his waist. She had left it untouched. Now she offered it to him. "I figured it mattered." The boy nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Nantan," he whispered hoarsely. "Your name?" He nodded again. "Nantan." She smiled gently. "I'm Clara." He didn't repeat it, just studied her, as if measuring the truth of her eyes. Outside, a branch snapped. She rose, peering through the shutter. Nothing but white. But she felt it now. Eyes, breath in the trees, the mountains holding still. "Someone's coming for you, aren't they?" she murmured. Nantan didn't answer. He didn't need to. She knew. He hadn't been left behind. He'd been lost. Injured. But now they'd found him again, and they were waiting. Watching. Judging her. "Do they think I'm a threat?" she asked. The boy's gaze softened. "You helped." But that didn't mean she was safe. That evening, as dusk bruised the sky purple, Clara placed wood on the fire with slow, careful hands. She didn't bolt the door this time. If they came, they would come through it anyway. She only prayed they'd see her for what she was. Not a captor, not a thief, but a woman who chose to save a child when no one else would. As she pulled the blanket higher over Nantan's shoulders, he reached out again, this time to rest his hand on her wrist. It was not gratitude. It was trust. And somewhere deep in the forest, 12 riders moved through the snow without a sound. They came with the snow, ghost-like and silent, woven into the forest like smoke. Clara didn't see them, not at first. But the crows did. 3 black shapes rose screaming from the trees just before dusk, circling wildly above the ridge. Nantan sat up straighter in the cot, his eyes no longer fogged by fever but sharp with knowing. He turned toward the window. "They're here," he whispered. Clara's hand tightened around the rifle by the hearth. "Will they come to the door?" He shook his head. "Not yet." She crossed to the window, careful not to shift the curtain. At first the woods looked still, but then she saw it, just a flicker, the edge of a feather, a flick of a horse's tail, a glint of bone-white paint across a chest, 12 of them, all mounted, all waiting. She swallowed hard. "They've been watching since morning, haven't they?" Nantan nodded. "They don't know what you are yet. Then I should show them." He looked at her. "You're not afraid?" Clara gave a sad smile. "I've lived out here alone for 5 years. It's not death I fear. It's being misunderstood when I meant to do right." She stepped out into the snow, slow and deliberate, holding nothing in her hands. The cold bit hard, but she didn't flinch. She walked to the edge of the trees, where the firewood stack ended, and waited. For a moment, nothing moved. Then one rider stepped forward. Older. Painted face. Long braids streaked with gray. A chief. "Where is the boy?" he asked in broken English. His voice was steady but not kind. Clara pointed to the cabin. "Safe. He was hurt. I took him in. Did you touch his medicine?" "No." "His pouch?" "I gave it back." The chief stared at her. "Why?" "Because he's a child," she said. "Because he was bleeding, and because I don't see Apache. I see a boy who needed someone." Silence fell. Then a second rider approached. Taller, younger, eyes burning. "We thought you took him." "No," she said quietly. "I found him." From behind her, the door creaked open. Nantan stood in the frame, wrapped in her old wool blanket. "She didn't lie," he called out. "She made the fever go away." The riders looked at one another. The chief dismounted slowly. "Then we will speak," he said. "Inside, if you have nothing to hide." Clara stepped aside. "You're welcome at my fire." The cabin had never felt smaller. 12 riders did not enter, but 3 did. Chief Taza, the elder with eyes like winter bark, his son Chaska, tall and sharp like a drawn arrow, and a younger woman with ceremonial beads braided into her hair. She said nothing, but her gaze moved constantly, taking in every thread, every breath, every hesitation. Clara kept the fire burning high, not to warm the room, but to give them something shared. Nantan sat between her and his people, silent, alert. Taza did not sit right away. He walked the room slowly, taking in the herbs drying above the window, the stitching on the boy's bandages, the worn rocking chair. "You live alone," he said, not as a question. Clara nodded. "Since my husband passed. And no one comes here?" "Not unless they're lost." Taza finally sat, crossing his legs. "Then maybe that's what he was, lost." Clara looked at Nantan, who met her gaze with quiet strength. "He was more than lost," she said. "He was hunted." Chaska's jaw tightened. "We found white man tracks, 3 horses, blood, no bodies." "He never said who hurt him," Clara replied. "He didn't need to." Taza nodded slowly. "We know. but it is different to hear it from the boy's own mouth. He looked at his grandson. "Tell it, Nantan." The boy hesitated. Then he spoke in Apache, low and trembling. Clara couldn't understand the words, but she understood the weight of them. Taza listened with eyes closed. Chaska stared into the fire. When the boy finished, the cabin sat heavy with silence. "He was brave," Clara said softly. "He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He held on." The woman beside the fire finally spoke. "And you fed him, cleaned him, sang to him in words he didn't know." "I did," Clara said, "because he needed more than medicine." Taza rose. "You gave us back more than a child. You gave us our blood." He stepped toward her, then bent low. Not a bow, not quite, but something older, a gesture of respect. "We do not forget." Clara's throat tightened. "I didn't do it to be remembered." "All the more reason we will," he replied. Behind him, Chaska looked at her with unreadable eyes. "There are debts born from kindness," he said, "and some cannot be repaid in words." Outside, the wind rose, but for the first time it sounded like song. That night, they lit a second fire. This one outside, where snow gave way to heat, and the moon watched in silence. Clara didn't know what to expect when Taza asked her to join them in the circle. She thought perhaps it meant questions or thanks, but what she found was something older, something deeper. The Apache didn't sit like settlers, with chairs and distance. They sat close, knees nearly touching, eyes open, shoulders straight. They shared the heat, the silence, and then stories. Not in English, not for her, but they didn't exclude her either. They simply spoke in the language that came before paper and fences. Chaska passed her a bowl of crushed herbs to warm her hands. The woman beside him, who Clara learned was called Awenasa, she who builds shelter, offered a small piece of corn flatbread. No one told her what to do. She just listened. Nantan curled up beside her, the same wool blanket wrapped around his shoulders, now stitched with a single white feather. "They thought I died," he whispered. "I saw them cry." Clara looked at the boy, stunned. "You saw them?" "I dreamed them. They were looking for me through water." She didn't understand, but she didn't question it. Some things weren't meant to be explained. As the fire cracked, Taza finally turned to her. "In our ways, those who save life without seeking payment are spirit-bound to the one they save. Not owned, not tied, but seen forever." Clara didn't know what to say. "I didn't ask for anything. I just couldn't leave him there." "Which is why the circle was called," Taza said. Awenesa reached forward and touched Clara's palm, then left a faint red mark with ash and crushed root. "You are not Apache," she said. "But tonight, you are not a stranger." The flames danced higher, lifting sparks into the dark like stars returning home. Across from her, Chaska met her eyes for the first time without weight. Only clarity. "Your land is your own," he said, "but if ever you call, someone will answer." Clara didn't cry, but the snow melted faster around her that night. And when she slept, the dream she had was not of loss, but of trees opening to make space for a woman, a boy, and a fire no wind could put out. The snow was still fresh on the pine when trouble came. Not from the trees this time, but from the valley below. 2 riders, rifles slung low, coats stitched with lawman's trim, Marshal Griggs and his brother-in-law, Boone Thatcher, the kind of men who wore stars not for justice, but to remind people where fear belonged. Clara saw them from the ridge as she gathered firewood. Their horses moved like they had a purpose, and their eyes never left the narrow trail that led to her cabin. She set the bundle down and walked calmly to the door. Inside, Nantan sat grinding dried herbs with Awanasa, his hands quick, expression calm. "Stay inside," Clara told them, "no matter what happens." Taza and Chaska were already gone, returned to the trees before sunrise, leaving only gifts and ash marks behind. But Clara had known something might come. Men like Griggs didn't let questions fade. They hunted silence. The knock was sharp. "Mrs. McCall," Griggs called. "We need a word." She opened the door but didn't step aside. "Speak it here." Boone leaned on his saddle horn. "We heard you've been keeping a wild one, an Apache boy." "I found a wounded child," she said evenly. "And I did what any decent soul would." Griggs spat. "You're not a doctor. That's not your place." "Neither is stealing children," she shot back. His eyes narrowed. "No one said anything about stealing." "But you didn't ride up here to thank me, did you?" Silence. Then Boone said, "Some folks think you're being watched." Apache riding close. Dangerous times, Clara. "They're not here for you," she said. "They came for the boy, and they've already left." Griggs dismounted. "We still need to see him." "No." The word dropped like a stone. He reached for the door. Clara raised her rifle, not shaking, not blinking. "You lay a hand on this door, and I swear to God you'll lose it." For a moment, nothing moved. Then Boone muttered, "She's gone full savage." But Griggs held up a hand. He saw it now, the burn mark on the doorframe, the stillness in her stance, the unseen presence in the trees. "This ridge ain't worth dying on," he muttered. They left without another word. Inside, Nantan looked at her. "You're not like them." "No," she said, lowering the rifle. "I never was." But now the whole valley would know it. The next morning, the sky was clear, but Clara's gut told her peace was over. Trouble never vanished. It just circled lower. And this time, it would come from both sides. She stepped outside with Nantan, who no longer needed her arm to walk. His limp was light now, his spirit stronger. Together they watched the ridge beyond the valley, where wind moved slow through the pines. "Will they come again?" he asked. "The men with the badges." "Probably," Clara said, "but next time they won't ask questions first." He nodded, quiet. Then he reached into his pouch and pulled out a tiny piece of coal. "Can I?" Clara smiled faintly. "I don't know what it means, but if it's yours, do it." He moved to the hill behind the cabin, where the wind was open and the trees were far enough apart to let smoke rise. He built a small fire, nothing that would draw a town, but enough for eyes that knew what to look for. Then he threw in something wrapped in hide. The fire changed color. Blue-gray smoke curled upward, not high, but steady. Clara stood beside him. "That a message?" "It says I'm safe," Nantan whispered, "but it also says they must watch the white men now." She swallowed. "You think the tribe will come back?" He looked at her. "They never left. They're just behind the trees you stopped looking at." That night, the forest felt alive again. Eyes, rustles, winds that spoke between branches. Clara didn't feel alone, but she didn't feel safe either. Not when she saw, at dusk, 2 men on horseback stop just beyond the far stream. Not Apache. Not Law. She couldn't place them. And that made it worse. She didn't wake Nantan. She didn't say a word. She stepped into the night alone, rifle across her back, and walked into the darkness like someone used to moving without a map. Near the stream, she knelt and placed 3 stones on a flat patch of earth. 1 for peace, 1 for warning, 1 for return. Then she walked back to the fire. "You told them I'm not like them," she whispered aloud, not to Nantan, but to the wind. but we both know they'll keep coming." And high above the ridge, where no fire burned, another smoke curl rose in answer, sent from someone unseen, someone still watching. The knock didn't come this time, just the crash of boots and the splinter of wood as the door slammed inward. Clara jolted from sleep, the fire still smoldering low. Nantan screamed, instinct pulling him under the cot. Two men in dust-covered coats stormed inside. Neither Griggs nor Boone. Outsiders. Mercenaries, maybe. Their rifles weren't for show. "Where is he?" one growled, kicking over a chair. Clara stood, hands raised but steady. "He's not yours. He's an Apache. There's a bounty." "Not from this town." "From the railroad," the taller one snapped. "They want no trouble on the new trail. Kid like him brings attention." Clara's voice dropped into steel. "He's a child. He was bleeding in the snow." "That ain't our problem," the shorter man muttered, eyes scanning the shadows. "They're moving tribes again. Gotta make room." Clara stepped in front of the cot. "You'll have to go through me." The taller man raised his rifle. "You really want to die for a stray?" Then came the sound, soft but unmistakable, a whistle, from the trees, one note, then another. The men paused, a third whistle, closer, then silence. Clara smiled. "You should leave, now." The taller man laughed once. "Who's gonna stop us? Your firewood." But before he could turn, an arrow sliced through the window and embedded in the wall beside his head. He spun. Too late. Shadows moved at the cabin's edge. Figures slid through the trees like fog with bone knives and feathers. The mercenaries bolted for the door, but one didn't make it. Chaska stepped from the dark, his arm a blur. The man dropped without a sound, knocked out cold. The other ran screaming into the pines. Clara exhaled for the first time. Taza emerged from the trees behind Chaska, flanked by 3 more riders. Awenasa knelt beside Nantan, who crawled out trembling but unhurt. "They moved quickly," Taza said. "Your signal was clear." "So was theirs," Clara said. "They want him gone." "Then we must move before more come." "Where?" she asked. "There's no place they won't chase you." Taza looked at her, then Nantan. "That's why he won't go with us." Clara's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" Awenasa stood. "You returned his body. He gives you his future." And just like that, everything changed. The fire had burned low again by the time Clara sat down, the room still heavy with what had just been spoken. Nantan leaned against her side, his small fingers wound tightly around hers. Across from her, Taza sat like a mountain, calm, unmoving, but full of gravity. "You want me to keep him," Clara said softly, "to raise him here?" Awenasa nodded. "Among our people it is not dishonor, it is bond. He chose you." Chaska stood near the window, arms crossed, gaze watchful. "We can't protect him from the government, from soldiers, from greed, but no one expects a settler woman on a ridge to raise a chief's blood. It may be the only way he lives." Clara looked down at the boy. His eyes searched hers, but there was no fear. Only a quiet hope that terrified her more than any rifle. "I'm just one woman," she whispered. "Alone." "You weren't alone tonight," Awenasa said. "And you won't be." "They'll come back. Others, with badges, with orders." "Then we'll come back too," Chaska said. "When you call, we answer." Taza leaned forward. "He will be one of us still. He will ride when we ride, speak when we speak. But he will live because you loved without asking if it was safe." The room fell silent. Clara closed her eyes. Her past flashed before her, the grave she dug alone after her husband's fever took him, the endless winters with only silence and aching hands, the way no one came when she cried for help. And now here was this boy, barely mended, clutching her hand like she was the world. Will you teach me? He asked, voice trembling. To make stew? To fix the roof? Clara smiled, tears sliding quietly down her face. Yes, and you'll teach me your songs. Taza stood. Then it is done. Awenasa pressed a woven bead circle into Clara's palm. This means family. Even if I'm not blood? Especially then, she replied. They left before the moon dropped behind the ridge. No trail, no promise, just the knowledge they were watching. And as the door closed, Nantan curled beside her, whispering one word before sleep. Mother. And Clara, who thought she'd buried that word with her past, let it echo through her like a prayer. She didn't correct him. The snow melted slow that year, as if even the seasons didn't want to rush away what had finally taken root. By spring, the yard was a patchwork of muddy footprints, bent fence posts, and one growing boy who no longer whispered at bedtime, but laughed without asking permission. Nantan, still called that in secret, but now also known as Samuel to the mailman and preacher, had mended the chicken coop, carved a flute, and once startled Clara by singing in both English and Apache while hauling water. The cabin was fuller now. Not with people, but with something stronger. Life. Clara kept his medicine pouch hanging over the hearth beside her late husband's portrait. She never touched it, but she dusted it with reverence. Nantan had never asked for more. He didn't need to. They both understood what had passed between them in that frozen winter. A child found, a woman remade, and a vow that needed no altar. Once a month, a single feather would appear on the fence post, sometimes red, sometimes white. No words, no rider, just proof that the trees still watched, that the fire never truly went out. When a man from town asked about the boy, Clara said, "He's my son." And when the man smirked, she asked if he wanted to see how fast she could still shoot. He walked away. They always did. That spring, Clara found Nantan sitting near the stream, carving symbols into the mud. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Home," he said, "but in the way the earth understands it." She sat beside him and watched. A spiral, a sun, a tree with roots deep and wide. "Will you ever leave?" she asked. "Someday," he said, "but not to run, to walk back to the fire and thank the people who let me stay here long enough to become strong." She reached for his hand. "And when you go, I'll be here." "I know," he said, "because you were the first person who stayed." That night, a hawk circled low over the ridge and vanished into the pines. Clara didn't light the lantern. She didn't need to. She stood on the porch, looking into the trees, and whispered, "He's still yours." The wind answered gently, "So are you." And the cabin held steady, no longer a shelter for the lost, but a home for the chosen.